It's interesting, isn't it? When we picture India's worst air pollution, a lot of us probably conjure up those hazy, smog-filled winters.
Yeah, North India, right. Delhi's crazy AQI readings usually come to mind.
Exactly. That's like the poster child. But what if that image, while, definitely real, only captures a tiny piece of a much bigger, maybe more worrying picture?
That's spot on. What's truly eye-opening when you really dig into the recent data is just how widespread this is and persistent.
Persistent how?
Well, dangerous air quality isn't just a seasonal thing in a few northern cities. It's like a year-round reality affecting pretty much the whole country.
Right. So in this deep dive, we're going to unpack some of the latest info, try and get to the heart of what's really going on with India's air pollution.
Yeah, because the common idea is winter problem, mainly Delhi. They don't quite match up with the facts.
So people listening might think, okay, it's bad in Delhi in December. But we're saying prepare to have those ideas challenged a bit.
Definitely. And what the data reveals is, frankly, quite alarming. There was a recent IQ Air report, for instance. It highlighted this really shocking discrepancy. It's about how air quality gets classified.
Classified how?
Based on Indian versus, say, European standards for the exact same pollution level.
Okay.
What India might call moderate, maybe slap a yellow warning on it, Europe would classify as extremely poor. Dark red warning.
Wait, yellow versus dark red for the same air?
Exactly.
Okay, that immediately makes you wonder if the real danger is being downplayed. Are people breathing really bad air thinking it's just moderate?
It definitely raises serious questions about risk perception, and it highlights why we need to understand the pollutants themselves, especially PM 2.5 particles.
Yes, PM 2.5. We hear that term a lot. Maybe we should clarify just how tiny and harmful these things actually are.
Absolutely. They are unbelievably small. Picture something, maybe. 1/30th the width of a single human hair.
Wow. That's hard to even imagine. How can something so small be so bad?
Well, that tiny size is precisely the problem. It lets them bypass our body's natural filters, like in the nose and throat.
So they just slip right past.
Yeah, they go deep into the lungs. But it doesn't stop there. They can actually cross from the lungs into our bloodstream.
Into the bloodstream. Okay, that sounds bad. So they can travel anywhere?
Pretty much. They can reach the heart, which significantly bumps up the risk of serious stuff like heart attacks and strokes.
Man. And what about kids? I remember reading they're more affected.
That's tragically true. Children breathe more air relative to their body weight than adults do.
Okay. So they get a bigger dose proportionally.
Exactly. A bigger dose of these pollutants, making their developing bodies really vulnerable.
That's a really scary thought. Okay. Shifting gears slightly, I think most people, myself included, still kind of assume Delhi is always the most polluted city. In India, maybe the world sometimes?
Right, that's the common perception. But the IQ Air report threw a real curveball there.
Oh, yeah. How so?
Well, the 2024 report actually found that Burnahat, a smaller city.
Burnahat. Where's that?
It's in Meghalaya, in the northeast, a region usually known for greenery, right?
Yeah, definitely. So what about it?
Well, according to that report, Burnahat was the most polluted city globally.
Globally? Wow. Not Delhi. That really changes the narrative.
It does. It completely dispels that Delhi-centric view and drives home the point we were making earlier. This is a nationwide issue.
So it really isn't just one or two hotspots.
Not at all. The report basically shows that nearly the entire population of India, like 1.4 billion people, are breathing air that doesn't meet WHO standards.
The entire population. That's staggering.
And it's not just North India. We're talking cities from Kashmir way up north, down to Kanyakumari in the south, Mumbai out west, Kolkata in the east, everywhere. And year-round.
So basically, wherever you live in India, chances are the air isn't great. Even if the specific causes vary a bit regionally, the underlying problems are similar.
Yeah, there are common threads running through it all. And hey, for anyone listening, maybe take a quick look at your weather app right now.
Oh, good idea. Most show AQI these days, right?
Yeah, and often you can find the PM 2.5 level too. It's a really direct way to see what you're actually breathing in your area.
Definitely a sobering check-in. Now let's put some numbers on this. The World Air Quality Report for 2024 said India's average annual PM 2.5 is, what was it?
50.6 micrograms per cubic meter.
50.6.
Yeah.
And the WHO guideline, that's way lower, isn't it?
Way lower. The WHO guideline is less than 5 micrograms per cubic meter.
5. compared to over 50, that's a massive gap.
It's huge. And it's important to realize even if your local reading is, say, 30 or 40 or even up to 70, which might sound better than the average,
Right.
it's still drastically higher than that WHO safe level of under 15, let alone the ideal of under 5.
Which brings us back to those different standards you mentioned. Can we break that down? How do the Indian standards compare to WHO or European ones?
Sure. So under Indian standards, good air, the green category, goes all the way up to a PM 2.5 level of 30.
30 is still considered good.
Okay.
And moderate, which is yellow, goes up to a shocking 90. 90. Wow. Okay, how does that stack up against WHO?
Well, WHO recommends staying below 15 for generally safe air.
15. So India's good is double the WHO safe level.
Pretty much. And then look at Europe. Their good is even stricter, below 10.
Below 10.
And once you hit 25 in Europe, it's already considered poor. Anything over 75 is extremely poor, dark red.
So let me get this straight. Air with, say, PM 2.5 of 80. That's still moderate yellow in India.
Correct.
But in Europe, that same air would be extremely poor, worst category.
Exactly. It's a massive difference in how the risk is communicated or maybe even perceived.
It really suggests maybe a worrying acceptance of unhealthy air in India. You mentioned Delhi didn't have a single good air day in 2024.
Not one. Using the Indian standard of AQI below 50, the best day Delhi had all year was an AQI of 53. Still in the satisfactory range, not even good.
That's stark. Okay, we keep saying PM 2.5, PM 10. Let's clarify. PM is particulate matter. What's the difference between 10 and 2.5, and is there anything smaller?
Good question. So PM10 are particles 10 micrometers or smaller. Think bigger stuff like dust, pollen, things that might irritate your nose and throat.
Okay.
PM 2.5, as we said, much finer. 2.5 micrometers or less. That's the 130th of a hair stuff.
Right.
And yes, there's even smaller. PM 0.1 or ultrafine particles, 0.1 micrometers or less.
And the basic rule is smaller is worse because it gets deeper.
Precisely. Our body can trap some of the PM10 in the upper airways. But PM 2.5, it goes right past those defenses, deep into the lungs.
And that's where the serious respiratory problems kick in, like inflammation, asthma, bronchitis, even lung cancer.
Absolutely. Lung inflammation, worsening asthma, bronchitis, and yes, a significantly increased risk of lung cancer over the long term.
And this isn't just about feeling sick, right? There's a huge cost involved in treating these things.
Huge. Hospitalization for a serious lung infection linked to pollution can easily run into lakhs of rupees, maybe 5 lakh to 10 lakh, sometimes more. That's a massive financial hit for families.
It's a massive, often hidden cost of breathing bad air. And you said it's not just the lungs. These particles get to the heart too.
Yes, via the bloodstream. Once PM 2.5 gets in your blood, it circulates. It reaches the heart, increases inflammation there, raises the risk of heart attacks and strokes.
Even in people who seem healthy otherwise.
That's what's really concerning. We're seeing cardiovascular problems cropping up in younger people, people without the traditional risk factors like smoking or poor diet. Air pollution is increasingly suspected as a major contributor.
That is sobering. And does it stop at the heart? Or can it go even further? What about the brain?
There's growing evidence suggesting these particles might even cross the blood-brain barrier.
Seriously.
Yeah. The research is ongoing, but it points towards potential links to neurological issues, maybe even mental health disorders. It shows how systemic the damage can be.
Wow. Okay, so this is affecting the whole body. Let's talk numbers, the real-world impact. Mortality. We look at some studies. The Karolinska Institute one was pretty shocking.
It was. Their estimate for deaths linked to high PM 2.5 in India between 2009 and 2019. It was a huge range.
What was the range again?
Between 3.8 million and potentially up to 16.6 million deaths over that decade.
16.6 million. That upper number is unbelievable. Why such a big range?
It depends heavily on which air quality standard you use as the baseline, the Indian standards, or the much stricter WHO ones. Using the WHO standard leads to that terrifyingly high upper estimate.
16 million potential deaths. That just puts the human cost in such sharp focus. It's not abstract numbers, it's lives lost. And the Lancet had figures too, right? More localized.
Yes. The Lancet study looked at 10 major Indian cities. It found that about 7.2% of all deaths in those cities were attributable to high PM 2.5 levels.
7%. How many deaths is that annually?
Over 33,000 deaths a year, just in those 10 cities. Imagine scaling that up nationally.
It's hard to square those kinds of scientific findings with, official statements sometimes claiming there's no conclusive data linking pollution and deaths.
The scientific evidence is certainly piling up. And look at the Chicago University's Air Quality Life Index report. That's another really compelling piece.
What did that find?
Their analysis suggests that, on average, breathing India's current levels of PM 2.5 pollution is shortening the average Indian's life by 5.3 years.
Wow. 5.3 years just
Yeah.
gone from
Yeah.
everyone's life expectancy on average.
Exactly. Air pollution is literally stealing years from people's lives.
And it's worse in some places, right? Like Delhi.
Much worse. In Delhi, the estimated reduction in life expectancy due to air pollution is a staggering 11.9 years.
Nearly 12 years.
Yes. And across the North Indian plains, generally, it's around 8 years lost. It's a massive, tangible loss of life.
It's terrifying, especially when you think about the most vulnerable, pregnant women, newborns.
Mm.
The impact there is just devastating, isn't it?
It really is. Air pollution can hinder fetal development. We're talking underdeveloped organs, lungs, heart. It increases the risk of premature birth, stillbirth, and even potential congenital heart defects. These are problems that can affect a child for their entire life.
And the danger doesn't end when the baby is born, right? That State of Global Air report.
Yeah.
The infant mortality figures were heartbreaking.
Truly tragic. That report estimated that in 2020 alone, air pollution contributed to the deaths of 116,000 infants in India within their first month of life.
116,000 babies in 1 year.
Yes. If you break that down, it's roughly 1 newborn death every 5 minutes linked to polluted air.
Every 5 minutes, that's just
Yeah.
gut-wrenching. It really highlights the urgency. And even for kids who survive that first month, they're still more vulnerable than adults.
Yes, definitely. We mentioned they breathe more air for their size. They also tend to play outside more, be more physically active.
Right, running around, breathing harder.
Exactly. So they inhale more pollutants. Plus, their lungs and immune systems are still developing, so they're just more susceptible to damage.
The long-term health effects could be huge. We saw that observation from Dr. Arvind Kumar, the surgeon, finding black deposits in kids' lungs.
Yeah, that's a deeply chilling observation.
Yeah.
And he also noted this really disturbing trend, lung cancer increasingly being linked to air pollution, sometimes even more than smoking.
Pollution overtaking smoking as a cause of lung cancer. That's a massive wake-up call. Okay, let's talk geography. We touched on the north-south divide. North India generally has it worse. Why is that?
Geography plays a big part. One key factor, especially in North Indian winters, is something called atmospheric thermal inversion.
Thermal inversion, what's that?
It's when a layer of warmer air sits above a layer of colder air near the ground. This warm layer acts like a lid.
A lid.
Yeah, trapping the cold, polluted air close to the surface, preventing it from rising and dispersing.
Okay, so the pollution just gets stuck down where we breathe. Makes sense. What else?
The Himalayas.
Mm.
The mountains act as a huge physical barrier.
How does that affect things?
They kind of block the airflow across the Indo-Gangetic Plain. It's sometimes called the valley effect. Pollutants get trapped in that vast valley region, especially when air movement slows down in winter. Like pollution getting stuck between the ground and the mountains.
Sort of, yeah. Think of northern Italy and the Alps. Similar geography can lead to pollution buildup in the valleys there too.
Interesting comparison. So what about South India? Why is it generally better, though still not great?
The south has geographical advantages, being a peninsula surrounded by sea on 3 sides.
Right, the coast.
That allows for much better air circulation. Sea breezes help to mix and disperse pollutants more effectively. Plus, the climate is generally warmer, so that thermal inversion lid effect is much less common.
Okay, so better ventilation, basically. We saw some PM 2.5 numbers comparing cities. Can you remind us of those, just to illustrate the difference?
Sure. Delhi's annual average was around 108 micrograms per cubic meter.
108.
Kolkata was about 45.6, Mumbai 33.7, Bangalore 30, and Chennai down at 26.
So yeah, a clear difference. Delhi's way higher than the southern cities.
Yeah.
And this is crucial, right? Even Chennai at 26. That's still way above the WHO guideline of 5 or even 15.
Yeah. Absolutely critical point. Relative cleaner doesn't mean clean. Chennai at 26 is still over 5 times the WHO ideal safe level. The whole country has a serious problem.
Got it. Okay, let's pivot to the causes. What's driving all this pollution? You mentioned the biggest one is often vehicular pollution.
Yeah, in many big cities, vehicles are the #1 culprit. Cars, trucks, buses, bikes. The exhaust fumes are just this toxic mix.
What's in the exhaust?
Carbon monoxide, nitrogen oxides, hydrocarbons, and of course, loads of those PM 2.5 particles we've been talking about.
And the percentage contribution is huge in some places, like Delhi.
Yeah, in Delhi, estimates suggest vehicles contribute something like 47% of the PM 2.5, almost half. Just try to imagine Delhi's air if you could magically remove all the vehicles.
The difference would be incredible. And the number of vehicles has just exploded, hasn't it? You mentioned Delhi's numbers earlier.
It's staggering. Delhi went from maybe 3 million registered vehicles in the late 90s to over 12 million just before 2020. That sheer volume is a massive driver.
So the government brought in stricter emission norms, right? Like BS6.
Correct. BS6 standards, introduced in 2020, significantly cut down the allowed PM emissions from new vehicles compared to the older BS4.
And there's the ban on really old vehicles, like over 15 years old in the NCR, and talk of BS7 in the future.
Yes, those are all steps in the right direction. But there are a couple of big problems undermining these efforts.
Okay, what are they?
First, just the sheer rate of increase in vehicle numbers. We're adding new vehicles so fast that it kind of cancels out the benefit from each individual vehicle being cleaner. More cars, even if slightly cleaner, still means more pollution overall.
The growth is outpacing the technology improvements. Makes sense. What's the second problem?
It's about infrastructure priorities. Government policies often focus heavily on building more roads, highways, flyovers.
Which seems logical, to ease congestion, maybe.
You'd think so, but it actually tends to encourage more driving. It makes owning and using a car easier and more necessary.
So it increases car dependency and takes space away from walking or cycling or public transport.
Exactly. It can force people who might prefer other options into driving. Look at Mumbai vehicle pollution's contribution to their problem, apparently almost doubled in just a few years, partly linked to this focus on road infra.
It's like a vicious cycle. More roads, more cars, more traffic.
Yeah.
You mentioned Kolkata's traffic congestion ranking.
Yeah, Kolkata ranked, I think, second globally for traffic congestion recently. People spending over half an hour just to travel 10 kilometers.
Ouch. And other Indian cities aren't far behind. Bengaluru, Pune, Hyderabad, Chennai.
Many major cities face crippling traffic jams, which again means vehicles idling, burning fuel, spewing more emissions.
So the solution seems obvious, if difficult politically maybe. Shift the focus.
Drastically. Shift investment away from endlessly expanding roads and pour it into public transport. Metros, buses, trains, maybe even trams. Make those the priority.
But governments love building highways, right? It's like road progress.
Maybe, but look at the numbers. A Nanian Ayog report pointed out India has way fewer buses per person than other developing countries, let alone developed ones. Like 1.2 buses per 1,000 people here versus 5 or even over 10 elsewhere.
That's a huge gap. And you mentioned Delhi's bus fleet barely grew while cars exploded.
Yeah, between 2000 and 2009, Delhi's government bus numbers went up by only 1%. Car numbers, up 9%.
Wow. And there was a projection about public transport use declining.
Yes, a CSE study projected public transport share of trips could fall from over 75% in the early 2000s to under 45% by 2030 if trends continue.
That's going in completely the wrong direction.
Yeah.
Especially since vehicle ownership in India is still relatively low compared to, say, Europe or the U.S.
Exactly. India has about 246 vehicles per 1,000 people. If ownership rates increase significantly, which they likely will as incomes rise, and we don't have robust public transport, the pollution situation could get unimaginably worse.
Now, let's be real. Why do people avoid public transport sometimes?
Overcrowding, long waits, unreliable schedules, lack of comfort, poor connectivity, the list goes on.
So governments really need to tackle those issues. Make buses and trains frequent, reliable, comfortable, affordable.
Absolutely urgently. Look at countries with high density and cleaner air. China, Japan, South Korea, Singapore. What do they have in common?
Great public transport.
Fantastic public transport, and often policies that actively restrict or discourage excessive car use. Singapore even caps the total number of cars allowed on the island.
So it can be done.
Yeah.
Prioritize public transport. Okay, cause number 2, dust. You said this links back to vehicles. The synergistic effect.
Yeah, they work together, unfortunately. A dust, sitting on roads, construction sites, bare ground, vehicles drive over it, kick it back up into the air. This road dust is a huge source of PM 2.5.
So how much does it contribute?
Quite a lot. In Delhi, maybe 26%, Kolkata around 25%, Bengaluru 23%. It's significant.
And this dust comes from?
Potholes, unpaved road shoulders, construction debris, general lack of cleaning. It's especially bad in high traffic areas and during dry spells like winter. You often see it as that general haze.
And when it mixes with vehicle exhaust?
It's even worse. The combination can be more toxic than either source alone.
We sometimes see those anti-smog guns or water tankers spraying roads.
Yeah.
Temporary fixes.
Very temporary. They might settle dust for a bit, but it just gets kicked up again. The real long-term solution is proper infrastructure,
Meaning?
paved roads, well-maintained without potholes, proper footpaths so people aren't walking on dusty verges, green belts with grass and trees alongside roads to trap dust, regular cleaning, maybe with vacuum sweepers.
Right, tackling the source. Okay, third major cause. Construction. We see building sites everywhere in cities.
And they generate a lot of dust, not just soil dust, but dust mixed with cement, sand, other materials. It's estimated construction contributes 20–30% of air pollution nationally.
It's a big chunk in specific cities.
Yeah, Delhi estimates are around 8–9% of PM 2.5, Mumbai maybe 9% of total PM. An average construction site can churn out hundreds of kilos of dust daily.
Again, we see temporary bans sometimes, like in Delhi during peak pollution. But what's the sustainable fix?
It mostly comes down to enforcing existing rules. There are regulations about putting up dust barriers or screens around sites.
You see those sometimes, the green netting.
Exactly. But they need to be high enough, properly maintained, trucks carrying materials should be covered, wheels of vehicles leaving the site should be washed. These rules exist, but enforcement is often lax. Regular checks and actual penalties are needed.
Makes sense. Okay, cause number 4, stubble burning. This gets a ton of headlines, especially in winter. Is it the biggest cause?
It gets a lot of attention, and it is a major problem during specific months, usually October, November, drastically worsening air quality in North India then, but year-round. Maybe not the single largest contributor compared to vehicles or dust overall.
What were the numbers on its contribution?
Central government data for OCDEC 2024 suggested it was about 10.6% of Delhi's pollution on average during that period, though it peaked at around 35% on some days. So significant, yes, but not the whole story.
Why do farmers do it? In Punjab, Haryana, Western UP primarily.
It's complex, tied into the Green Revolution legacy. That pushed water-hungry rice cultivation, leading to a water crisis, groundwater depletion.
Okay.
Then, a law in Punjab, the Preservation of Subsoil Water Act from 2009, delayed rice planting until the monsoon to save water.
Right.
But that squeezed the time window between harvesting rice and needing to plant the next crop, usually wheat. Burning the leftover rice stubble became the quickest, cheapest way to clear the field in that short window.
So time and cost issue for farmers driven by water policy.
Largely, yes. There's actually an old law, the Air Act of 1981, that prohibits it, but the penalties are often less than the cost of alternatives.
What are the alternatives?
There are machines, happy seeders, rotovators, balers that can incorporate the stubble back into the soil or collect it, but they're expensive, often unaffordable for small farmers.
So the solutions seem to be
2 main paths. 1, government support making these machines available cheaply or even free through subsidies or cooperatives. 2, encouraging crop diversification, shifting away from rice towards less water-intensive crops like millets.
But changing crops is complicated too, right? MSP, markets.
Very complicated. There's government money allocated for crop residue management, billions of rupees since 2018, but reports suggest it's not enough, or maybe not spent effectively. State governments like Punjab are asking for much more funding.
So a tricky problem needing financial support and likely bigger agricultural policy shifts. Okay, 5th and final major cause, industrial pollution.
Yeah, factories, power plants, chemical, textile, cement, steel industries, refineries, they release a nasty mix, PM 2.5, sulfur dioxide, nitrogen oxides, carbon monoxide.
And their contribution.
It varies. In Delhi, maybe 15–18%, but higher in more industrial cities. Kolkata, around 24.5%, Mumbai, 18%, Chennai, 20.2%. It's a big factor.
Have there been steps taken to control this?
Some significant ones. The Supreme Court banned petcoke, a dirty industrial fuel, back in 2017. And the Delhi government actually shut down all 3 of its coal-fired thermal power plants by 2018.
Delhi has no thermal power plants now.
Correct. It's the only state without one operating within its borders, a big move towards cleaner energy.
Delhi's still polluted, so shutting down local plants isn't enough.
Exactly. Delhi is surrounded by industrial hubs in neighboring states, Gurgaon, Noida, Faridabad, Ghaziabad, Meerut. They still have polluting industries and power plants whose emissions blow over into Delhi.
Ah, so it proves you need national or at least regional coordination. You can't solve it just within one city's borders.
Precisely. You need strict, consistently enforced national regulations for industries across the board, and a faster shift to renewables everywhere.
Right. So the government launched the National Clean Air Program and CIP in 2019 to tackle this nationally, right? What was its goal?
NCAP targeted 131 of the most polluted cities across 24 states. The aim was to reduce PM10 levels by 40% by 2025-26 compared to 2017-18 levels.
Okay, a 40% reduction target. How's it going? Has it been successful?
The results so far seem underwhelming, unfortunately.
How so? You mentioned issues with funding and impact.
Yeah. Firstly, reports suggest only about 64% of the allocated funds, billions of rupees, were actually utilized over the first 5 years.
Okay, so money left unspent. What about the money that was spent?
That's maybe even more concerning. Apparently, around 67%, two-thirds of the money spent went towards dust control. Things like mechanical sweepers, water spraying.
Temporary fixes we talked about.
Exactly. While much less, like only 14%, went to controlling biomass burning, 12% for vehicular pollution, and a tiny 0.61% for industrial pollution control.
Wow, that spending seems really skewed towards temporary measures rather than tackling the root causes like vehicles and industry.
It does raise questions about the strategy's long-term effectiveness, and the results reflect this, maybe.
What did the results show?
A recent analysis, I think, from the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air found that pollution levels actually decreased in only about 31% of those 131 NCAP cities.
Only a third showed improvement.
Yeah. And worse, pollution levels actually increased in 29 cities, including places like Delhi, Chandigarh, Jammu, and others.
So, in many targeted cities, the air got worse despite the program. That's disappointing.
It is. And there's another issue. The focus seems to be mainly on PM10 for tracking progress.
PM10, the larger, generally less harmful dust particles, not the dangerous PM2.5.
That seems to be the case. Anumita Roy Chowdhury from CSE noted that while NCRP initially aimed at both, the performance assessment shifted more towards PM10, possibly because it's easier to show reductions in dust levels. But PM2.5 is the bigger health threat.
So focusing on the easier metric might hide lack of progress on the more dangerous one. This all really seems to boil down to political will, doesn't it?
It often does. If the public isn't making a huge noise about air pollution, politicians might understandably focus on other issues that get more immediate votes or attention, maybe religious issues, identity politics.
Things that evoke strong emotions, perhaps, even if pollution affects everyone.
Exactly. We saw that quote from the taxi driver, right, saying people vote on Hindu-Muslim issues, not on who will clean the air.
Yeah, that was telling.
But the thing is, air pollution doesn't care about your religion or background. It damages everyone's lungs, everyone's hearts. It doesn't discriminate.
And it's not just health, right? There's a massive economic cost, too.
Huge. The World Bank estimated in 2024 that air pollution costs the Indian economy something like $36.8 billion every year. That's over 1.3% of GDP lost.
$36 billion annually. Wow.
Another analysis suggested the economy could have been $95 billion larger in 2019 alone if air pollution wasn't a factor. Think about what that means for development, for kids' futures.
It's a massive drag on the economy, on top of the health crisis. So what's the takeaway? What needs to happen? Seems like raising our voices, demanding action is key.
It has to be. We need to pressure governments to act decisively on the real causes.
Can we quickly recap the main solutions tied to the causes we discussed, like for vehicles?
Massive promotion of public transport, metros, trains, buses. Shift funding from just building more highways, get older, polluting vehicles off the road. Strictly enforce the 15-year rule, maybe even deny fuel eventually.
Okay, for dust.
Proper roads, fix potholes, build footpaths, green belts. Use vacuum sweepers regularly, not just temporary water spraying.
Construction.
Strict enforcement of the rules. Cover materials, put up barriers, wash wheels. Regular checks, real fines.
Stubble burning.
Government needs to invest seriously in providing affordable machines to farmers as alternatives. And long-term, encourage crop diversification away from water-guzzling rice where possible.
Industry.
Enforce the strictest possible emission norms. Push hard for renewable energy. And coordinate across state lines. Pollution doesn't respect borders. Bernahat, being so polluted, likely points to nearby industrial sources needing scrutiny.
And public awareness.
It's crucial. People need to understand the sources, the health risk, and be encouraged, even incentivized, to use public transport, reduce their own footprint where they can.
It's a big list. Requires action from government, industry, and individuals.
It's a complex, massive problem, no doubt. But understanding the causes, understanding the solutions that are possible, that's the absolutely essential first step towards making change happen.
Definitely. So as we wrap up this deep dive, it's clear this isn't just a winter problem or a Delhi problem. It's year-round, nationwide, deeply impacting health, lives, and the economy. The gaps in standards, the slow progress, It leaves you thinking.
Hmm.
What's our role, individually and together, in demanding cleaner air? And looking at everything, vehicles, dust, industry, stubble, construction. If you had to pick one single action implemented nationwide, what do you think would give us the biggest, quickest win? Something to ponder.
It's a tough question, and I'd really encourage listeners to dig into those reports themselves. IQ Air, World Air Quality Report, the AQLI from Chicago University, the Lancet, State of Global Air, World Bank data, even the NCFP details. Form your own informed view.
Good point. And maybe look at how other countries tackled this. Those examples like Singapore, South Korea, Japan, see what worked with their public transport and vehicle policies.
Absolutely. Because ultimately, this needs a collective voice. Talk about this with your friends, your family. Think about how you can push for cleaner air where you live. It affects every single one of us, and building a healthier future really demands that we all pay attention and demand action.